So for the camera, my name is Dr. Philip Phillips, Associate Dean of the University Honors College, and I'm pleased to welcome everyone to our lecture series on spaces and places. We're off to a great start, and I'm glad to have all of you in the class. So today, we have someone who is no stranger to the Honors College, Dr. Janis Brickey, who is Associate Professor in Human Sciences. Not only is she a member of our honors faculty and has been for many years, but she is a member of the Honors Council, and she has spoken in this series before. Not only has she spoken in this series before, but she and I organized a lecture series on design thinking several years ago, which I thought was fantastic. It was all because of her. So I like to invite her back whenever I can. She's brilliant. So Dr. Brickey, with degrees grounded in systems thinking, her career includes interior design, architecture practice, design build projects, nonprofit grants and contracts, and education. Her accolades include the 2014 MTSU Foundation Distinguished Creativity Award, the Tennessee IIDA Leadership and Sustainability Award in 2017, and Outstanding Professional Member Nashville in 2016. She also represented interior design at the 75th Celebration of Women at Virginia Tech. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Brickey. Welcome.
So it's a pleasure to be here and to see students who are engaged in their activities and linking at different ways to become better themselves. We have these kind of students in human-centered design, in interior architecture, but I always like coming to the diverse population we see here because it engages you in the way that a university should operate and provide for itself. You are part of the first honors college in the state of Tennessee. And in addition to that, one of the things that the late Provost Brad Bartell would say that we have an academy. And I always feel like Honors College represents that concept of the academy and how you come together to learn from different perspectives and you see who you can become. So today I'm going to challenge you to think a little differently. Design thinking is a course that I'm actually teaching concurrently right now during this time slot. And I have the VP of Operations and Facilities for MTSU talking to my students about ways they can become student designers to help make some changes here at the university. I totally believe in engaging people in the process. And sometimes it's scary, but I want to take this journey with you today to see how I can get you to think a little bit differently. Maybe you won't. That's the chance I have to take. I have to look at it with ambiguity, but that's okay because that means that maybe you think about it later. I think the most important lectures I heard as an undergraduate were the ones that I remembered 10 years later. And what was said and how it was said made me think differently in the context of my current time. So when I was looking, and Dr. Phillips contacted me about this lecture series, I went through so many different titles. And Milieu, and I always said Milieu before, and my son said, who's a PhD candidate at NC State, said, "Mom, why did you use a word that you mispronounce?" Because I want to always associate to try, and then also too, maybe there's something you don't understand that I can change your mind about today. So work with me, okay? I've admitted that I don't know something, that I'm not good at languages, okay? I can tell the difference in a quarter of an inch, but languages, no, that's not me. But I wanted to still use this because this word has meaning to me. I graduated from Virginia Tech, and then I went to practice in the field. And when I came to graduate school, one of the things is I heard this word, and I was like, wow, that is so cool, because it means that it's a context. It's an environment around you. And the way I learned it, which is interesting, was because of environment behavior and linking at the built environment and linked at the context of things. Concurrently, when we look at ecocentrism, one of the things that was happening back in the 1800s and through literature, they were starting to make an awareness of the environment and talk about the environment in poetry and other readings and writings. And to me, all these things are coming together because we as human beings, we are not stagnant, we always change. And you have to understand you will continually change all your life because you're an evolving living creature, but also too, society changes around us. And there's been so many changes recently. I just want to share with you my perspective. So when we talk about mindfulness, mindfulness means that you're aware and you're being cognizant of what's going on. And so to me, I want to engage you with the mindfulness journey and what design thinking is, and then how you can use it in different ways. And then lastly, I want to engage you with some of the things that my world has been doing to make your world better. So design thinking process, and this comes from a textbook that I use, but we have to empathize first. You cannot design something for somebody else without understanding who they are, where they're from, and what is important to them. Because what's important to you may not be important to them. And this has to do with cultural differences, it has to do with economic differences, it has to do with educational differences. It has to do with community differences. What may be important in one community may not be important in another. And then we have to define the problem. And so when we define the problem, we have to look at it objectively. We have to take emotion out of it, and we have to say, what are the issues that we have here? How can we come together to solve these issues? What are some of the ideas that may have worked with this issue before that won't work now? So what you're doing is you're doing scientific research. You are defining things in context of saying, these are things that might work. This is a source that I might be able to use for this paper. Again, you have to define what your source is going to be and your idea as far as your problem. Then you have to ideate. And this is the part where we do the actual creative part of it. We have to step outside of our comfort zones. And the idea here is that when we ideate correctly, and if we are very thorough in this, then the rest of the process goes very clearly. But design thinking is forgiving. So if we get to ideate and we find out it doesn't work, we can go back to define, and we can go back and look at empathy again. Maybe we don't have all the story, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not linear, it can be circular, it can go this way, because what it's doing is it's defining things in context. Again, linking at the environment in which it resides. And then we go to prototyping. And prototyping is the most fun part. I'll show you some illustrations of this a little bit later, but one of the stories that I told in the lecture series before, and when we started it, was that there was a couple that had identical twins. And one of them was born, it was two boys, and one was born with a blockage in his colon. And what they were going to have to do, and they went to doctor after doctor, but what the doctors are all telling them to do was to do a colostomy bag for that baby. And they thought that would just be so hard. And if that child had to grow up with that, it would be very different from his sibling. So they went to this one doctor. It's the last one they went to. And they went through all of the things. He told them the same stuff. And the mother looked at him and said, what if this was your child? What if you had twins and this is your child? So children play, right? So the doctor went home that week or sometime in the intervention, and he started watching his child play with magnets. And he had gotten a new set, and a couple of them were really hard to get apart. And guess what happened? He goes, what if we use magnets to sever the membrane? So what they did is that they took a super magnet and they placed it down on one side of the membrane in the colon, and then they placed the other one on the other side. It bound it up to it. And then over time, it severed it in a couple of weeks, no surgery, and they graduated from college back in 2014. Okay? Because empathy. If this was my child, what would I do? And then also, too, looking to see an alternative way. Always being open to there's a different way to do things. So then you have to test it. Well, their test was that it worked, right? All right. So, design thinking, it's a deep dive, and we'll go through these strategies. Number one, empathy. We establish an emotional connection. We have to define. We have to ideate. And again, if we do this correctly, we don't have to go any further and go back to the drawing board. And then prototype, iterate, and then test. So, empathize. Establish an emotional connection with the persons. And I brought up images here that you could easily empathize with. But could you empathize with this if it was somebody that was different from you or different situations? We have the elderly and we have children. Everybody always empathize with this particular groups because they seem to be very engaging, and we can see that there's some commonalities. We have two people in wheelchairs. We have people having touch. We have people maybe not touching, but most men and their sons will walk this way. They won't like put their arms around each other and touch. There's this connection to this. But the other piece that I put in here was the touch of a dog, because it's another human, or not another human being, another being that is alive, and often those touches of dogs become very, very important. So this empathy, this engaging and understanding people, we have to look at it in that context. So define, the problem is critical and the wrong problem is diagnosed, we may be wasting their time. So I put up a picture like this, because could this be a little boy? Could it be a little girl? Is it at the ocean? Do we know which ocean it's at? Do we know anything about it other than there's a child with rain boots on looking at the water? This is the only thing we can define about that problem. We can take it further and further, and that's what we have to do design thinking, but often we will look at a problem and just go right to the answer because we want to have that first answer. We want to be able to say, I understand it, but we have to dive deeper into it. So the first steps in ideate is like you want to have many, many solutions. So on your right-hand side here, how many of you played with Legos as children? How many of you, after you saw the package and the design, how many did you try to use it in different ways? How many of you took your Legos and did different things with it? Okay? All right. So you weren't constrained by the Legos and the packaging. You wanted to play with it differently. You were doing what we call ideating because you were engaging with it differently. Okay, when we solve a puzzle, what do we have to do? Anyone? Do you get all the color pieces, but do you group them by color? Do you do the perimeter first so that you can find out where that is? There's different ways you can do it. No one way is correct because you may do it one way with friends and then you go do a puzzle with a family member and you do it differently. So there's different ways to solve a puzzle, right? And then in this one, this is what we do a lot. We take Post-it notes, we take ideas, and we come up with general ideas, and we ideate, and we go to our clients with this, and we say, this is where we think we are. What do you think about it? Because we don't want to solve the wrong problem for them. They may not have given us the right communication. So prototyping. So this is a story I'm going to tell you, and it comes from IDEO was started back in the 1990s, and it was originally supported by a major manufacturer of furniture called Steelcase. And Steelcase wanted to have designs for spaces and like furniture for schools, etc., that were different and novel. If any of you grew up in a school and you had a desk that had a space for your backpack underneath that had rollers on it and stuff, that was a Steelcase product. They did it for kids in elementary schools. So what the problem was with the owner or the principal of IDEO, his friend, his wife developed a very debilitating arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. If you know anybody with it, it really can do, it does a number on your hands. You cannot control things. And so she was a gourmet cook, and she still wanted to cook. So what they did is they went to IDEO and said, can you come up with some kind of solution for us? So they tried different things, and they prototyped and they prototyped. And they said, we're not linking at the right client base to prototype. So what they did is they brought a bunch of the people who worked there and other friends of theirs, they brought them in and had them start to cook with adult tools, because children cannot grip things like adults can. And all of the kitchen utensils were made for adults. So I illustrate here that this child got up on top of the counter because they were too short to be able to get up and work at the table, right? And these children were helping each other because their hands were too small to be able to work with the dough. And this child is using their hand because they can't control the spoon and the flour in the bowl together as they're going through. And then in this one of the things that the child is doing is that it's taking both hands to use the piece. So what they observed is that they left them alone. There was no adults. So some child got the brilliant idea of taking a dish towel and wrapping it around a spoon so that they could grip it. And they started doing some prototyping and say, we need something that does this. So they even took like the utensils and they took like toilet paper rollers or, paper towel rollers, and they put around it and they taped it, and the kids could use it better. Guess what? They took that idea and it became OXO. Because those are stronger grips and they're bigger and people can use it better. Okay, so it came from children. It came from watching children play. And a very important idea here is that children aren't afraid to try something different. That's embellished in us in school. Okay, so designers go back to ideate stage after testing if there are problems. How many times, if you went to the beach as a child, the ocean took your sandcastle, or something else happened, and it was destroyed by somebody or something? And so what kids do is that they just go back and rebuild it because they know it's not permanent. It's part of what you do at the beach. And then I use this one because I've seen kids do this before. They'll put their favorite colors on there and it doesn't line up, and then they have to redo it so it stacks up correctly. Because if you do the ones that's supposed to be at the top and try to put it on, it's too small to get down on the cylinder. So, test. So when we test things, we may do a presentation, and often this level of presentation that we do in my world, it has to be kind of loosely defined because we want to make sure we're on the right track before we go into final presentation. And then the other thing is this would be like a more final presentation, and the student would get feedback, and this is what we do in the professional world. But so many firms I know, they always have a backup presentation in case their client doesn't know something. It might be a different color scheme, it may be something you can switch out, because you can't really know everything until you get the client's responses, the user responses. Just like using different types of implements to cook with. So, I hope this works. Oh, am I going to be able to play it? Maybe. Okay, it won't play. Okay, so, the kid of the year. Okay, okay. The door. The magic door.
Time magazine is honoring a scientist who created a bar of soap that has the potential to transform skin cancer treatment. Did we mention he did this while also participating in his school's marching band?
My name is Bekele. I'm 15 years old and I love science, creating, and I recently made skin cancer treating soap.
Yes, the 15-year-old scientist from Fairfax, Virginia is Time's 2024 Kid of the Year. Time putting Bekele on its cover, recognizing him for, quote, developing an affordable compound-based bar of soap that could in the future be a new and more accessible way to deliver medication to treat skin cancers, including melanoma. The teen was already named America's top young scientist by 3M and Discovery Education last year for his invention. Bekele telling Time magazine he is passionate about skin cancer research and finds it incredible that one day his bar of soap will be able to make a direct impact on somebody else's life.
I personally hope one day that Skin Cancer Treating Soap can turn into a more not-for-profit organization where we can really just distribute it to people that need it the most.
Okay, so the backstory to this, he has family in Ethiopia and they have bad skin cancer situations. So he wanted to take upon himself to figure out some way to make it better. Okay, a lot of products are delivered via soap. Okay, you can have fragrances, you can have antiseptics, you can have other things. And so he just thought outside the box and said, what if we could deliver this? Now, it's not there yet, but the idea is because he had empathy. He wanted to make it better. And then he didn't say anything about having this product and making millions. He said, I want it to be able to be distributed to the people who can use it most. So even if you have a really cool project, how do you come about making sure that other people can have it? So, oh, it would have done that. So what happens a lot of times is that we have to deal with ambiguity. And ambiguity is the quality of state of being ambiguous. Well, am I being ambiguous or what? So something that can be understood in two or more possible ways. So when you saw it, where you think, I don't know what you were thinking, but you could have thought, oh wow, this could be a really good thing to happen, or it could be, wow, that would be a tremendous product, or what have you. But the thing is that when we have something we're not sure about, we start using this to kind of determine what's going on. So ambiguity comes from two Latin, or from ambiguous. And then ambiguity is about holding two ideas at the same time and understanding something in more than one way. That's kind of heady, if you'd ask me. Because what happens there is that we have to have the idea, but we have to be open to looking at it differently. We have to be open to thinking about it in a new way. And so we can have dualities, we can have multiplicities, or we can have an active interpretation. So if we have dualities, we're trying to make sense of it with what we know is true, or how we might be able to interpret something. If we have multiplicities, we're trying to say, well, this is kind of like this, but it could be also kind of like this. And then if we have an active interpretation, this is when we try to engage into what it actually is. And we're trying to understand it in a more engaging factor. So when I put this illustration up here, it's like you would think, we know by our knowledge and everything, by our idea of what an interpretation is, that this person is not that tall. It's just a shadow that's being created. But if you didn't have the context to understand that, you would think, is this a real person? Because it seems so different from what we would anticipate. But you can do that. You can look at it and say, well, this is a normal height person, and the sun's at an angle, and this is what I see. So ambiguity is like the act of reading tea leaves, the way some people go about it. It's like people practice ambiguity to and on unambiguous stuff. Before you settle on an interpretation, ambiguity allows you to be creative. So this idea of tea leaves, how many people when they were children, or you've seen children do this, play in rocks or whatever and make all kinds of stuff out of it? You're not defined by what it is. You're not saying I'm playing with rocks. It becomes a castle, it becomes a waterway, it becomes different things. So this is where children are natural at being ambiguous because they're not using all the other stuff that's happened to them to define what's going on. So our response is not objective. It's based on our interpretations and our emotional responses. It's like if you have been through a tornadic activity, every time you hear a siren, you will respond to it. Okay? It's our experiences. But if you hadn't before, it may say, well, where is it? Because your concept would be a little different. It's deeply connected to our experiences, the context, the history, and our character, and who we are. It's also, individual interpretations are valid. Never tell a young person that something cannot be done, because God may have been waiting centuries for somebody to come up with the idea. This idea of being a childlike in looking at things, you will look at it differently. Okay, so when we talk about uncertainty, a lot of times it's just differences. Differences in perspective, differences in who we are and where we come from, our experiences. So Uncertainty can be, when will the delivery arrive? Because you may have gotten the post from Amazon, it's going to be there in 15 minutes, and it's an hour later when it arrives. There's uncertainty to it, right? Has you ever experienced that? Something was supposed to be delivered by a certain time and it isn't? Okay, when will you get a job? Has anyone ever gone through a job interview process and been nervous about when you're going to hear back, etc.? Okay. What if a new pet is not liked by other pets? Okay, that can happen if you have multiple pets. What if my paycheck is late and I bounce my rent payment? That's a really bad one, right? That can be scary. Okay, when will I adjust to college life? Well, you should be adjusted by now, but I use this with freshmen because I tell them the first month you're still adjusting to even getting to your classes. And then, when will this class end? That would be the next thing, because there's the certainty to it to a certain degree, but you're not sure. Maybe I'll let you out early, right? All right. Okay, so ambiguity, there's no single correct answer because it's going to depend upon who you are, the circumstances, your perspective on it, etc. But when you have people who can have agreement about something, then that's when you can start having the more creative processes come into play. And sometimes you need that person who doesn't agree to be able to make it a good solution. So layers of meaning on anything from complex to less complex, meaning can be different. Your mind can explore and imagine possibilities that are unknown or don't exist. Have you ever daydreamed? How many people like to daydream in here? Okay, do you daydream about like maybe shows that you've watched, or do you daydream about certain situations, or maybe going on a trip? Do you daydream about other things? I mean, the whole idea here is that if you can subconsciously daydream, if you can allow your mind to do that, you can be more creative. You can be more engaged in other things. Okay, so ambiguity might look like, what could a blank sheet of paper become? Anyone? I have a blank sheet of paper. What can I do with it?
Origami.
Huh? Origami?
Paper airplane.
Okay. Anyone else?
And draft up first ideas for a company.
Okay. You
Art.
could go ahead.
Art.
Art?
Can become shredded.
Huh?
Can become shredded.
Okay. Anyone else?
Paper mache.
Okay, I wasn't sure, I didn't hear you. Okay.
Paper mache with it.
Okay, safe with it. You can crush it, you can tear it, you can burn it, you can stamp on it. You can fold it, you can tear it, you can do other things with it. One day I went on for 5 minutes of the different things you can do with a single sheet of paper. Okay, so we get so used to looking at things one way, do we need to look at it differently? Can we look at it as being something other than a sheet of paper? Okay, what can I learn from new contexts and cultures? There's lots of things you can learn, right? All right, what happens when I step outside my comfort zone? Does that one make you uncomfortable? Sometimes it should, but sometimes it shouldn't. Sometimes we need to step outside to be able to look at a problem differently. What happens when I allow contradictory data to exist? This is one in science we have to be very careful with, right? Because we want to look at the statistics, we want to look at the reliability of what we're doing, but maybe that question hasn't been answered yet. Maybe that question isn't there to be answered yet, but you can write it up and say, this is another way to look at it, right? Because you can take ownership for what you've done. So, you know, there are different ways that we deal with this, but we have to deal with it in a way that's appropriate to our context. Okay, what are the different ways I can interpret something? The piece of paper, right? Or how many people have seen something new, like a new product, etc., and you didn't know what to do with it? Have you ever seen a child look at something they've never seen before? Like the first time they take a bite of ice cream? They don't know what to anticipate from it. It's just different. Okay, so these things are very important to think about because it's like, can you get yourself into that mindset of someone who's never experienced something before? All right, what are the different ways that I can interpret something? How might it respond to fluctuating timelines or constraints? This is one that's really hard in university life, right? When you have different timelines and constraints, and then someone, adds the paper at the end. And so how do you deal with it? You come with a plan to be able to do it. You try to focus your time during the day on the events for one class that you do the best. So creativity is essential for idea generation and dealing with how ambiguity defines differences. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that if you take a more open mindset when you have things that are ambiguous, if you take a more open mindset when you have a problem to solve, you can look at it entirely differently. So, uncertainty, different paper versus brain. So we see paper, but then our brain can think of different ways to look at that paper. If brain reacts to ambiguity as is uncertainty, and so what happens is that, what else can I do? This is where your creativity comes into play in dealing with issues as far as defining what a problem is. So, experience is a common method. We have an adapting lens. We adjust. We look at experiences. We are meeting and interviewing people. We engage with them. It gives us context. We observe different processes and activities. And important is technology to drive the intent of work, or is it? And then critical, the what or the who determines direction. And humans are the center of our work. We prioritize humans whose needs and interests are being considered, not our own. But if your research is toward animals, etc., they would be your intent, but you still have to deal with humans as far as publishing your events, etc. You always have to deal with people. So I'm bringing this into play because one of the things that the state of Tennessee has been doing is establishing more state parks. This one was just opened up this weekend at the Nolichucky. Okay, so the thing is that the state of Tennessee, even though they've got lots of state parks, etc., they're always looking for ways to be able to preserve the land and look at things differently and have it established so other people can enjoy it. Does that make sense? So they're looking at it from the standpoint of like, what can be our direction? And they have other ones that are on the docket to become state parks to preserve what is here in the state of Tennessee. So, how you react, your attitude about ambiguity, the key findings by authors from the student body. So, I base a lot of this work from the Stanford School of Design, which IDEO is part of. And what they found out is that students, when they went through this set of activities, their attitude was one that was defined by three different ways to look at the problem. Number one, you would endure, feel antagonistic. You wanted to get to the goal. You wanted to get it over. There may be some of you right now saying, I'm enduring this class. Some of you are engaging, but some of you are going like, okay, I understand where she's coming from, but maybe what's the punchline to this? You're enduring to get to the punchline. And then you engage, facing it head on, like skydiving or wandering alone in unexplored forest. It's just unknown. You're not trying to say, oh, I'm not sure about this. It's just unknown. And you know it's unknown, and you're going for it from that perspective. And then some people might embrace. You have the follow-up opportunity, and you're accessing it at will. So what this means is that the more experience you have in these types of situations, the more you're going to be able to embrace it. Okay? And then if you go through the design process, if you go in with this whole idea of embracing things that are unknown, your solution to those early parts of looking at defining the problem and ideating, etc., will go more smoothly, and you won't have to go back and redefine things. Does that make sense? I think it does. So if you can get to the point that you embrace ambiguity, you're not afraid of it, and you're not looking at it as like, well, where are we going to go with this? But if you just let it flow with what you're doing, you will be more successful. So, one of the things that happens when we deal with other people, we're all different ages, etc. So I did this with my design thinking class, and they are currently freshmen, some of them are in their 20s. And what I did is I gave them an assignment the first day of school, and I said, go talk to your family and friends and find someone from different age groups and ask them a series of questions. The questions were, how did you communicate with other people when you were growing up? If you're a silent generation and baby boomers, it might have been telephones and landlines, but then it became cell phones and other things. Then I asked them questions about, had them ask questions about what was different things that you did, how did you watch movies? All these things started changing, of course, over time. But the coolest thing I asked them was, what was the word for something that was cool or great or good or okay for that different generation? So these are the unofficial results from my class. There were about 43 students in the class, and sometimes people gave more than one answer. So from the silent generation, it was groovy, so great, swell, good, neat, nifty, cool man, sauce, awesome. And then super cool, which was an interpretation of this from one of the grandparents. So I came about this because of the word copacetic. Because copacetic is a word that means slang good in the 20s. And I had an experience in doing some training where someone said that, and I didn't know what it was. And I asked my father from this generation, and he said, oh yeah, that was what we said all the time. And I never heard it again until I watched the movie about Buzz Aldrin, and when they came back from the moon, and they said, when it was all good, they said it was copacetic. And I said, that's that generation. That generation that was part of World War II, etc., that was the word they used. So baby boomers, this is from 1946 to 1964. We had 10 groovies. And I had one student said that they didn't use groovy because it seemed too hippie. And then cool beans, the bomb, right on, far out, you can read it. Great, bad, sweet. And then perfect in Arabic. And then Gen X, we had, it went on, but not as much as Gen Z. So Gen X is 1965 to 1980. We still had groovy. And the one thing that I noticed is that cool was across all of the different generations. That was the only word that was consistent across all generations. And we have totally awesome, gnarly, bad, dope, type, the bomb, wicked, super, off the hizzy. I never heard that before. Rad, fly, boss, word is bond, totally tubular. And that happened with both the Gen X and the millennials. All right? And so all the way down here, there were different ways that people responded, and they talked to different generations. Oh, well, Gen Z just went crazy. Everyone was giving multiple answers. And so I had to figure out some way to ferret this out from what they presented. Awesome, what's up, cool, slick, out of sight, tight, far out, slay, swag, great, fantasy, smooth, sweet, epic, fantastic, dope, sauce, impressive, fire, slaps, gas, lit, bussin', I think. And then someone just said W, and I don't know what that meant. And then fresh, good. Look at it. And look to see the commonalities across different things. So one of the things I thought I might do, if we had more time and everything else, is give you a Post-it note and have you postulate with ambiguity of what you might say if someone asked you this when you were in your 50s or 60s. What would be the word that you would describe for your generation to say these things? All right. So, Berg, in his paper, The Primal Mark, How Beginning Shapes the End, research findings, you start out with familiar territory, you end up producing familiar ideas. I had no idea what I would get from this. It took me like 5 or 6 hours to interpret all of it, but it was there. If you start with a novel, unusual mindset, you develop far more interesting ideas. You can always down the outcomes, but harder to dial up. So, 3 facts about empathy that works together. Experience sharing. Very important because it's effective empathy. It makes a difference. If you share, if I had told you about empathy, but if I hadn't shared the story about the doctor who said, if this was my son, how could I look at this differently to be able to separate that membrane? It's effective because it makes meaning to you. You could put yourself in that person's shoes. It's shared self, it has representations to it, and it's emotional. It has to have that emotional component to it. And then mentalizing, this is cognitive empathy. This is when you could visualize how something else could happen, how you could design something, how you could do something different. How you do this in science all the time because you're linking the way models could be able to interact together differently. Perspective taking. Maybe you have this stance on something and there's this saying, walk a mile in my shoes. If your shoes are different and someone else's shoes are different, how can you walk in it and get that empathy for their perspective? And then theory of mind. And this one's a little bit heavier, but essentially it's like, how does your mind operate? And how can you embrace that and still operate to be able to mentalize? And then pro-social concern, this is empathetic motivation. This is one of the reasons that people take up causes. And then they have sympathy because of the interaction with other people. And then they have empathetic concern that it could be different. Now, these last ones, I want you to think about them just for a few more minutes. So, when I talked about, and I introduced this, I was just trying to introduce you to this mindset about being mindful about what your environment is. But I care deeply about the environment. And so, one of the things that happened concurrently with things that were going on with ecocentrism was the establishment of the first Whole Earth Catalog in 1961. And then there were people who started this movement toward being more conscious in the way that we design buildings. And so over time, and it started like in 2008, we had the first green certified buildings. And I'm a lead green associate, and I'm a WELL AP. That means I believe in the ways that we can make buildings healthier. So this was shared. They're having the 25th anniversary soon of the first LEED certified buildings, etc. And this is the current status worldwide, and how these people who had a different idea have affected buildings across the globe. And I share this with permission from USGBC. There have been over 197,000 plus LEED projects in 168 countries. It's not just something in the US, but there's a global movement toward more sustainable building practices. Cumulative designed to save a total of 15.4 million cubic tons of carbon. Cubic tons of carbon have been saved by these efforts. And then 100 million metric tons of carbon since certification. And then economic impact, U.S. office investment sales of the U.S. investment sales are, what they have found is that they are, if you sell them, you can get them for 30% more, okay? Because having a LEED certified building is very important. There are higher price premiums over other non-LEED certified spaces. We have a Green Build Conference, and it's coming up in a couple of weeks in LA. And over 22 years in 20 cities, there have been over 300,000 people who've attended, which is amazing. 9.3 million students impacted for the Center for Green Schools. And they're healthier schools that maybe you attended as a child growing up. 85% of employees in LEED certified buildings report improved productivity and happiness due to quality of air and views of natural sunlight. 80% of these employees said enhanced air quality is important. And then there are over 200,000 LEED professionals, and there are something like over 5,000 organizational members worldwide. I've spoken to people from Australia, from China, from Europe, and the idea here is that it's a collective way that people want to have empathy for our earth and our building. So, to become more connected and creative, to find time to unwind. This is my final part of you. If you spend 15 minutes in nature, you will improve your creativity by 50%. Studies show that if you take time to unplug, get outside, feel nature, see it, you will be more productive and you'll be more creative. Okay? Instead of going for a cup of coffee, go walk around places where it's shaded. Sit in the grass. Enjoy that nature is here because it helps to ground you. Create space to go slow, to engage and use your outdoor environments to connect you to spaces. Sit on a park bench instead of eating your lunch in the pod or something. Go outside and experience. And then build incubation periods with nature and really engage. Allow yourself to do this. You will be happier long term. You will be healthier. Your biorhythms will be different. You will sleep better. And then biophilic design, the theory, science, and practice. This was in 2008. It has only been proven time and time again. In my world, we use biophilic design elements and we have increased productivity in spaces. We have longer engagement. People do not leave that employment. They stay there and they're happier because they have these opportunities to have aspects of the environment around them. So I want to leave you with a couple of quotes from one of my favorite people. Margaret Wheatley wrote a series of books when she was talking about things in relationships. So the first one, whatever your personal beliefs and experiences, I invite you to consider that we may need a new worldview to navigate this chaotic time. This was written back in the late 1980s. It's always going to happen. We're always going to have chaos. We cannot hope to make sense of our old maps. It won't help to dust them off or reprint them in bold colors. The more we rely on them, the more disoriented we become. This is ambiguity. And they cause us to focus on the wrong things and blind us to what's significance. Using them, we will journey only to great chaos. If we try to use the old ways to do things to do what is current, maybe there's some pieces that are real, but we have to look at it with our day's lens. Okay? We are always poets exploring possibilities of meaning in a world in which is also the time exploring possibilities. There's poetry in words that describe nature. I will always remember my mother quoting Robert Frost. She's been gone for like 28 years. I can still hear her voice as clear as day reciting that poem because it has meaning to me. Okay? But poets, the languages are so important because they also help us in design thinking. And using a thesaurus is a good thing. So, the river never drinks its own water. The tree never tastes its own fruit. The field never consumes its own harvest. They selflessly strive for the well-being of all those around them. This is what we have to do. This is where we become mindful of our milieu and we engage and we can make ourselves better, we can make our world better, and we can think differently. And I invite you to do so. This was taken last year up in the Shenandoah Valley. My son and I had planned to meet in Gatlinburg, what would be last weekend, and we didn't because of Hurricane Helene. And I had been to the Shenandoah Valley when I was like 4 years old, but I live in the part of the Appalachian Mountains that goes all the way down the state of Virginia. And even Johnson City was hit, but even some 3 hours north of there are mountains that look like this that my brother said it looked like somebody had taken them and ripped them off and thrown them down like pickup sticks because the water is so saturated and everything else. So be mindful of these spaces that we have, enjoy them and celebrate them because you never know when they might change. But also too, there will always be other spaces and always go to explore different things. And when I went back as an adult after being there as a child, I loved it even more. So take time in design thinking, make sure that you define the problem right, that you think as a child and you look at things with a different lens, that you're not afraid of ambiguity, and that you realize that even in your families, even in the people, we have something like 6 or 7 different generations here in the US and the world. Everyone's going to have some words that they all have the same, but sometimes we don't understand people because we don't understand their context in the world. But you can be mindful and you can have an environment in the future that is good and safe. So thank you for your time today.